We're currently in the Parsha Lech Lecha, and we can learn a very valuable lesson from this Parsha. Often a person run into all sorts of difficulties in life, all sorts of tests, or all sorts of situations that puts an individual under a lot of stress, or puts a person in a situation that he feels that he's going lower in his level of belief and trust in Hashem. And unfortunately, when a person runs into a difficult situation, as they call it, a nisayon, a test, one feels that he gets further away, drawn away from Hashem, and one wonders, how can I rise up to get out of this situation and get close again to Hashem and have the trust and the belief in Hashem. So this Parsha comes to teach us a very valuable lesson. The first thing that this Parsha is talking about is about the first Jew, Avraham Avinu, our forefather Abraham. And the Parsha starts with a commandment, Lech Lecha, go. And Lech Lecha is also the name of the entire Parasha. According to the rule that the Torah is eternal, and its teaching is eternal, and not only eternal, that it has power at any time. Meaning that what we learn from the Torah is not only a story that we read in the Parsha, rather it's a story that can be learned even in our days. And the commandment Lech Lecha teaches us that the first thing and the most important thing that is required from a Jew is to go, is to walk, to be in an action of walking, not to stand in one spot. Obviously, it's talking about more of a spiritual level. One cannot say, "Oh, I'm good where I am. I'm serving Hashem the way I want to, and I'm good here. I don't need to continue." The Torah tells you no. You constantly have to be in a form of walking, of continuing and raising and going further. And more than that, when you're in the motion of walking, you're also in the motion of elevating yourself. Of course, we're talking here in a more spiritual level, not in a physical level. Now, we find that in this Parsha that is teaching us that we should have all the time hope and continue walking forward, we find a great contradiction. In the middle of the Parsha, we find that Abraham and Sarah, they had to leave Eretz Israel, they had to leave Canaan, because there was a big famine, and they had to go down to Mitzrayim, which the term that it uses is that they had to laredet leMitzrayim, they had to go down to Mitzrayim, they had to step down from where they were. And as a result of them leaving Eretz Israel and going down to Egypt, as a result from that, Sarah was taken to the house of Pharaoh. And besides the fact that she was safe because Hashem's angel was protecting her, but the whole situation was not such a convenient and nice situation. And all in all, it seems like it's a contradiction, because the Parsha is teaching us, you have to look forward and all the time continue and have hope and have strength and trust in Hashem. But there we have this great contradiction that we learn in the Parsha, that Avraham Avinu and Sarah had to go down to Mitzrayim, which symbolizes a yerida, going down from their level. But very soon after, what do we learn? That Abraham went back to Eretz Canaan. And the verse that the Torah is using is that Avraham Avinu after that went out of Mitzrayim ויצא ברכוש גדול. So he had a period that he went down, went to a lower level, went to Mitzrayim, but after the period of the bad period, they went out of Mitzrayim. And not only that they went out of Mitzrayim, they came out with tremendous wealth. So to kind of understand this concept, we got to explain another concept. And we know that the Talmud has two types of Talmuds. There's the Talmud HaBavli and there's the Talmud HaYerushalmi. These are two types of Talmuds. The Talmud HaYerushalmi is known to be very straight to the point. No questions, no contradictions, no arguments. There's the concept and then right away the halacha, the psak halacha. And on the other hand, the Talmud Bavli is known to have a lot of questions and backwards and forth and arguments and what's called pilpulim and kushiot, all sorts of answers and backwards and forth till they get to the actual point. To understand the halacha is many stages of backwards and forth and arguing and so forth. So it takes a long time to actually find out the halacha. But we know that if there's a disagreement, a machloket, between both Talmuds, the halacha is always as the halacha is the Bavli. That at the end of the day, the one who determines the halacha is the Talmud that has all the questions and the backwards and forth and the discussions and so forth. So we learn that in order to get to the bottom of something, we go by the type of Talmud that has all the questions and discussions. And from here we learn that this is kind of the whole purpose of exile. And where do we learn that? Because when we read in the Parsha in a very superficial level, we see that Avraham Avinu had to go to Mitzrayim, and on the superficial, on the outer level, it seems like a very bad thing. Sarah was taken to the house of Pharaoh, they were separated, it was a dangerous situation. But from that Yerida, from that descending, came from that a great ascending, a great elevation. And as we read in the Parsha, it says, Vayal Avraham mimitzrayim, kaved meod b'mikneh v'chesef v'zahav. That Avraham Avinu was elevated up from Mitzrayim, and how? Very heavy. The term that the Torah uses is very heavy, but of course it's talking about extremely wealthy. How was he wealthy? With a lot of cattle and silver and gold. So we learn that from the whole Yerida, from the whole descending, was a much greater aliyah, an ascending. And this we learn, this is where we get our lessons for all generations, that even at the time of descending, at the time of exile, which seems an extremely big descending, and we're in a very dark generation with problems and issues and sicknesses and wars and whatever you want, whatever you can name, there's problems in this generation. So it seems that the Yerida, the descending, is so strong that there can't even be a way of getting out of it. But in a more inner level, we see that because of this great descending, the ascending, the aliyah, is much greater. And why do we know that? Because we know that from this great descending of the exile, we're going to get to the highest level of ascending, which is when we're going to have the third holy temple. As it says, the third holy temple, the great honor of it will be much greater than the first and the second. So we learn from that the greater the darkness is, the higher and greater the light that one can achieve by coming out from that. And we see in the situation of our world that our world right now is considered in a very dark time, a very spiritual dark time, and this darkness is just going and becoming stronger and stronger. And one might say to himself that there's no way out of it. One can find himself in a state of despair and saying, how can we get out of this situation? And on a more personal level, people are dealing with problems of livelihood and educating their kids and sicknesses. Hashem Yerachem. One can fall in despair and say, this is such a low level. How can I elevate myself out of this? How can I even see the light at the end of the tunnel? So for this parsha comes and teaches us that even when we go to the lowest level, it's only in an external level, and it just looks bad in an external way. But in the internal part of it, the pnimiyut, the essence of it, it's only good. And since Hashem is running the show, Hashem is governing the world, this descending is only for the purpose of ascending to a much higher level. What's called Yerida Letzorech Aliyah. We're going down in order for us to go up. So the greater the going down is, the greater the elevation will be. And how is that done? Only when we connect ourselves to Hashem. So we get the power and the advice from this parsha that even when it seems that the situation is the worst, in essence, it's actually where we can reach the highest and elevate ourselves to the highest level, and only by having the trust and bitachon in Hashem. And when a person finds himself in this situation of despair or spiritual darkness, one should not give up or give up hope. Rather say and see that in this tremendous darkness is hidden this great light, and when the person will overcome this obstacle, he will reveal this great light and will be elevated to a much higher spiritual level. So the next time, I don't wish it to anyone, but if next time a person finds himself in a situation of despair, of problems, of anything, instead of losing faith in Hashem and saying, I'm in a dead end, rather internalize and understand this is just the external part of it. And in an internal part, this great darkness, I can create much greater light out of that and elevate myself to a much higher spiritual level.